Imagine a world where one man, just a man, convinced millions he could command the sun, control the Nile, and conquer death itself. For 3,000 years, pharaohs ruled not just Egypt, but the human imagination. Their names echo in our history books, their faces carved into mountains, their tombs so grand we still call them wonders. But what if their divine power wasn't a miracle, but history's first viral marketing campaign? The paradox of immortality. We live in an age of skepticism. Politicians lie, ads exaggerate, influencers filter reality. Yet when we look at the pharaohs, we still whisper, maybe they were different. Maybe they really were gods. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The greatest trick the pharaohs ever pulled was convincing the world they didn't need tricks. How do you control a civilization for millennia? Simple. You make them believe you're immortal. You carve your face into temples taller than skyscrapers. You write your name in stone, but burn the receipts of your failures. You promise eternity while quietly hiring an army of priests, architects, and spies to sell the dream. Sound familiar? Maybe the pharaohs didn't just build pyramids. Maybe they built the first playbook for power. A playbook every leader, from emperors to CEOs, still follows today. The God King's weakness. But even the slickest campaigns crack. Behind the gold and granite, the pharaohs were human. They bled, they starved, they panicked, and sometimes they failed. In the sands of Amarna, buried under centuries of shame, lies the smoking gun of their greatest secret. A secret so explosive, it shattered the God King myth forever. We'll uncover it in this video, but first, let's rewind to the beginning. To the moment a clever mortal realized, if I can't be a god, I'll just act like one. Divine rulers or master manipulators? So here's the real mystery. Were the pharaohs truly all-powerful beings, blessed by the cosmos? Or were they history's most brilliant con artists, PR geniuses who weaponized myth, fear, and spectacle to rule one of Earth's most enduring empires? Think about it. Today, it takes a TikTok algorithm 15 seconds to make someone famous. The pharaohs? They stayed trending for 3,000 years without a single Instagram filter. How? Well, let's just say they understood the dark art of content creation long before it had a name. They chiseled their narratives into stone. They turned droughts into divine tests, defeats into strategic victories, and their corpses into literal monuments. But here's what chills me. We still buy it. We stare at their gold masks and think, magic. We ignore the receipts, tax records proving their vaults were empty, letters begging allies for gold, worker strikes etched into pottery shards. Why? Because the pharaohs didn't just sell a lie. They sold a story. And humanity? We've always been suckers for a good story. Over the next 15 minutes, we're tearing down the golden curtain. We'll meet the pharaoh who erased his own father's name to steal his legacy, the queen who wore a fake beard to hack the system, the divine king who begged his enemies for money and then claimed it was tribute. And yes, we'll answer the burning question. How do you keep millions believing you're a god? Spoiler, it's not about miracles. It's about manipulation. Stick around, because by the end, you'll never look at a pyramid or a politician the same way again. Next parts, the divine mirage. We'll expose how pharaohs used fake news carved in stone, why one queen had to literally masquerade as a man to keep her throne, and how the priests of Egypt became the ancient world's first spin doctors. Oh, and that smoking gun I mentioned? Let's just say there's a reason one pharaoh's name was scrubbed from history, and it wasn't because he was divine. Think history is just dusty books and dead empires? This channel isn't about dates, but about little-known aspects of historical events and personalities. We raid forbidden tombs. We decode whispers from burned libraries. We ask questions like, what if the Egyptian gods were just narcissists with good PR? Hit subscribe if you want. Mind-blowing theories that make academics sweat. The truth about history's greatest liars, fakes, and geniuses. Ring the bell, because tomorrow's video might rewrite everything you think you know about empires. History isn't a museum, it's a crime scene, and you're invited to steal the evidence. Subscribe to this channel and join the 1% of people who question everything. Part 1. The Divine Mirage. Gods with Clay Feet. Meet Hatshepsut, history's first female pharaoh, master of reinvention, and the original gender-bending icon. To rule Egypt, she didn't just wear a crown. She strapped on a beard. Not just any beard, a fake ceremonial one carved into every statue of her. Why? Because in a world where gods were male, divinity had a dress code. Hatshepsut didn't break the rules. She hacked them. And in doing so, she exposed the golden lie every pharaoh sold. You too can be a god if you fake it well enough. The invention of divinity. The pharaoh's divinity wasn't written in the stars. It was written in stone, literally. Take the pyramid texts, humanity's oldest religious writings, etched into tomb walls 4,300 years ago. They scream, "The sky quivers before him. The earth trembles at his gaze." Poetic, right? But here's the twist. Who wrote those words? Not the gods, not the pharaoh. Priests, state-funded, tax-fed, bureaucracy-approved priests. Think of them as ancient spin doctors. Their job? Turn mortal men into cosmic brands. If the Nile flooded, it was the pharaoh's divine bargain. If it didn't, a test of faith. Failures became folklore. Scandals became scripture. And when a pharaoh died young, oops, he chose to ascend early, which begs the question, if gods need tax-funded PR teams, how divine are they really? Hatshepsut's propaganda machine. Hatshepsut didn't just use the system, she weaponized it. When her stepson, Thutmose III, was too young to rule, she declared herself pharaoh. But Egypt wasn't ready for a queen, so she rebranded. Statues recast her as a muscular king. Official records proved the god Amun himself fathered her. Carvings showed her birth as a cosmic event, with a moon whispering, "This one's gonna trend for millennia." But here's the kicker, she paid for it all. Her mortuary temple, Deir el-Bahari, wasn't just a tomb, it was a biopic. Every column told her story. Every mural confirmed her divinity. And when she died, her stepson, Thutmose III, threw a tantrum fit for a TikTok cancellation. He smashed her statues, chiseled her name off walls, and tried to erase her from history. Why? Because her greatest sin wasn't being a woman. It was revealing how easy it was to fake godhood. The price of the divine lie. But even gods have budgets. To keep the myth alive, pharaohs bled Egypt dry. Temples ate up a third of the kingdom's grain. Priests demanded gold, land, and endless offerings, all to maintain the cosmic balance. Translation, keep the peasants poor and the propaganda rolling. And the people? They weren't fools. Papyri from Deir el-Medina, the workers' village, show strikes over late wages. One complaint reads, "We're hungry. Pharaoh says he's a god. Let him feed us." Even the divine couldn't silence empty stomachs. Which leads us to the ultimate irony. The more divine a pharaoh claimed to be, the more human he looked. When crops failed, they blamed droughts on chaotic spirits, not their own mismanagement. When invaders came, they called it a divine trial, not a military blunder. The god kings were terrified, not of death, but of being exposed as frauds. The cliffhanger, cracks in the golden mask. But the truth has a way of slipping through the cracks, and for the pharaohs it started with something as simple as bad weather. In 1200 BC, the Nile didn't flood. Famine spread, and for the first time Egyptians asked, "If our pharaoh's a god, why can't he fix this?" Panicked, the priests staged rituals. The pharaoh promised miracles, but grain stores kept shrinking, and in the shadows a rebellion brewed, one that would force a pharaoh to make a choice, double down on the lie or admit he was mortal. Spoiler, he chose the lie. But as we'll see in the next chapter, even pyramids can't hide desperation forever. Next, the pyramid paradox. We'll reveal how the pharaohs turned back-breaking labor into the ultimate distraction, and why the pyramids were less about the afterlife and more about crowd control. Oh, and that pharaoh who faced famine? Let's just say his solution involved more than prayers. It involved a secret police force. Part 2. The Pyramid Paradox. Monuments or distractions? The pyramids of Giza are eternal, 4,500 years later, they still pierce the sky, defying time itself. But here's the dirty secret Egypt's pharaohs never wanted you to see. The real marvel wasn't the pyramids. It was the hustle. Because while the tombs were built to last forever, the workers who built them, their bread rations expired in weeks. Let that sink in. They carved immortality for others while living on borrowed time. The grand illusion. We've been sold a lie. The pyramids weren't just tombs. They were the ancient world's biggest reality TV show. A spectacle so dazzling, it distracted millions from the rot beneath. Think about it. How do you keep a population from questioning your divine rule? You give them a project, a big project, one that's backbreaking, awe-inspiring, and utterly pointless unless you're a dead pharaoh. Enter the Great Pyramid, 2.3 million stone blocks, 20 years of labor, 10,000 workers hauling, chiseling, sweating. And what did they get? 3 meals a day, a bed in a mud brick dorm, and the privilege of serving a god king who'd never even visit their village. But hey, at least they got health care. Seriously, broken bones found in worker graves show signs of healing. Pharaohs needed their human cogs alive but not too comfortable. But here's the genius. By centralizing labor, pharaohs turned dissent into logistics. Can't rebel if you're too busy hauling 2-ton stones. Can't question divine rule if your kids are eating state-issued grain. The pyramids were less about the afterlife and more about crowd control. They built tombs to last eternity, but their bread rations expired in weeks. So ask yourself, were these monuments symbols of power or desperate bids to keep 10,000 people too tired to revolt? The sandstorm strategy. Pharaohs understood a universal truth. Busy people don't rebel. Give them purpose, even a pointless one, and they'll ignore the cracks in the system. It's why empires build pyramids. It's why CEOs love hustle culture. And it's why your phone's always buzzing. Distraction isn't new, it's ancient. But the pyramid hustle had a shelf life. When the Nile flooded, workers sang hymns. When it didn't, whispers spread. And one pharaoh, terrified of those whispers, tried a new trick. Instead of burying his power in stone, he buried it in sand. His name was Akhenaten, and his desperate gamble, a city built on lies erased by time, holds the key to the pyramid paradox. But that's a story for next part. For now, let's follow the breadcrumbs. The cliffhanger, control's dirty secret. Because here's the truth the pharaohs knew. You can't control people forever with stones and slogans. Sooner or later, they'll want real power, real food, real gods. And when that day came, the pharaohs had a plan B, a darker, quieter weapon, one that didn't need pyramids, just shadows, spies, and a network of informants who'd sell their mother for an extra loaf of bread. But that's the next chapter. And trust me, you'll never guess which pharaoh perfected the art of state-sponsored fear. Next, the Army of Shadows will expose Egypt's secret police, decode Pharaoh's encrypted hate mail, and reveal how one god king blackmailed his way to power. Spoiler, turns out divine right is cheaper with a little blackmail. Part 3, the Army of Shadows, Spies, Bread, and Broken Promises. Pharaohs had a problem. Pyramids could distract the masses, but what about the thinkers? The troublemakers? The ones who asked, if our king's a god, why's my beer ration cut? The solution? Egypt's first surveillance state. Meet the Medjay, desert rangers turned secret police, tax collectors, and the ancient world's most overworked snitches. Their motto? See something, say something, or lose your tongue. The bureaucracy of fear. Forget pyramids. The real engine of pharaonic power was paperwork. Every grain harvest, every beer batch, every birth and death, recorded, taxed, and cross-referenced. Why? Because hunger is a revolutionary. And the only thing scarier than a starving mob is a starving mob with receipts. The Medjay weren't just muscle. They were auditors with daggers. They tracked grain shipments to crush rebellions before they started. They bribed merchants to spy on rivals. They even had rat incentives. Snitch on your neighbor, get an extra loaf. Sound familiar? Turns out the NSA's playbook is 3,500 years old. But here's where the divine facade crumbles. In 1350 BC, Pharaoh Akhenaten received a letter from a minor king. The demand? Send gold now. The threat? Or everyone will know you're broke. These weren't isolated threats. The Amarna letters, a trove of diplomatic mail, exposed pharaohs as desperate, wheeling and dealing politicians. One letter begs Cyprus for silver. I have none. My people are naked. Another whines about fake gold shipments. You sent me painted lead. Embarrassing. So let's ask the forbidden question. When your god king begs for gold from some backwater ruler, does divinity just mean bankruptcy? The answer's carved in these tablets. Pharaohs weren't gods. They were middle managers of a shaky empire, bluffing with borrowed gold and divine credit they couldn't cash. The deal was simple. Give us your grain, and we'll give you eternity. Temples doubled as tax warehouses. Priests were accountants with incense. And every harvest, the Medjay ensured nobody forgot their dues. But when drought hit, the system imploded. Take Ramses III. His reign began with glory. Wars won, temples built. Then the Nile dried up. Grain stores emptied. Workers at Deir el-Medina staged history's first recorded strike, yelling, "We're hungry! Pharaoh's a god! Make him fix it!" Ramses panicked. He raided tomb supplies, slashed priestly rations, and even sold royal land. Divine solution? More like divine DoorDash. The god king had to deliver or get exposed. The cliffhanger. The heretic who tried to burn it all. But one pharaoh refused to play the game. He saw the bureaucracy, the lies, the hungry crowds, and snapped. Instead of bribing priests, he fired them. Instead of begging for gold, he declared war on the gods themselves. His name was Akhenaten, and his reign would become Egypt's strangest, most dangerous experiment. A revolution so radical, his successors scrubbed his name from history and buried his city under desert sands. Why? Because Akhenaten didn't just break the rules. He proved the entire system was a scam and threatened to take the pharaoh's greatest secret to his grave. Next, the heretic king. We'll explore the insane truth about Akhenaten's sun-worshipping cult, why he erased Egypt's gods, and how his own wife may have killed him to save the empire. Spoiler, his divine revolution ended with a dagger in the dark. Part 4, the heretic king, when the god king rebelled against gods. In 1353 BC, a pharaoh did the unthinkable. He declared war on the gods, not foreign gods, Egypt's gods, the ones who'd legitimized his ancestors for 1,500 years. Akhenaten didn't just break the rules. He burned them, buried them, and built a new capital in the desert to escape their ghosts. But was this a spiritual awakening or history's most narcissistic power grab? Let's dig into the madness. The Sun King's revolution, Akhenaten's masterstroke, replace Egypt's entire pantheon with one god, Aten, the sun disk. No more Amun, Isis, or Osiris, just light. Priests were fired, temples were padlocked, even the word gods was chiseled off monuments. In their place, carvings of Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their kids, bathed in sunbeams, literally the only humans allowed to commune with Aten. Convenient, right? But here's the twist. Aten wasn't a god, it was a logo. A sun disk with rays ending in hands, always touching the royal family, never the people. Akhenaten's message? Divinity flows through me. Pay no attention to the starving peasants behind the curtain. The result? Economic freefall. With Amun's temples closed, the tax and grain machine collapsed. Trade routes withered. Soldiers once paid with temple gold deserted. Meanwhile, Akhenaten poured Egypt's wealth into Amarna, his city of light. Its palaces had painted floors showing ducks and fish. Because why feed the people when you can walk on art? Even his art style screamed megalomania. Statues warped his face, elongated skull, sagging belly, feminine hips. Scholars call it naturalism. Let's call it branding. By looking nothing like previous pharaohs, Akhenaten became unforgettable. A rebel, a messiah, a dictator. So, visionary or tyrant? Let's weigh the evidence. Visionary angle. He ditched bloodthirsty gods for love and light. He promoted Nefertiti as co-ruler. a radical move. His art celebrated family life, not just conquest. Tyrant angle. He erased all other gods to become the god. Dissenters vanished. His religion died with him because nobody else mattered. Here's the kicker. Akhenaten didn't hate religion. He hated competition. By cutting out the priestly middlemen, he funneled all divine authority to himself. Akhenaten's fatal flaw wasn't heresy. It was forgetting the first rule of pharaonic PR. Keep the bread coming. While he scribbled poetry to the sun, Egypt starved. Grain shipments stopped. Allies defected. And when plague hit Amarna, even Aten's light couldn't save his children. In the end, Akhenaten learned the hard way. You can't eat ideology. You can't drink hymns. And no amount of sun worship will save a god-king who forgets he's still a man with a crown. His experiment collapsed. His city was abandoned. And his name was erased so thoroughly we only rediscovered him in 1907. But his legacy lives on, as a warning. Next, the women who ruled the Nile. We'll meet the queen who stole a throne using a fake beard, the seductress who outsmarted Rome, and how they exploited Akhenaten's greatest lesson. To rule Egypt, you don't need gods. You just need a better story. Spoiler, one of them did it all, while pregnant with Caesar's baby. Part 5. The women who ruled the Nile, rewriting the divine script. Hatshepsut wore a fake beard. Cleopatra smuggled herself into a carpet to seduce Caesar. 2 queens, 2 strategies. 1 lesson. To rule as a woman in a man's god game, you don't break the rules. You rewrite them. Hatshepsut, the gender-hacking pharaoh. Hatshepsut didn't ask permission to rule. She took it. When her stepson Thutmose III was too young, she declared herself pharaoh. But Egypt's divine script had no female leads, so she hacked the system. Statues recast her as a man. Broad shoulders, square jaw, that iconic beard. Inscriptions called her His Majesty and Son of the Sun God. But here's the twist. Her 22-year reign was peaceful. She launched trade expeditions to Punt, bringing back gold, incense, and a dancing pygmy. She built monuments so grand, later pharaohs stole credit. Yet after her death, Thutmose III tried to erase her. Why? Because she proved the divine rules were flexible, and that terrified the men who came next. Cleopatra, the myth that outlived Rome. Fast forward 400 years. Enter Cleopatra. Polymath, polyglot, and PR savant. She didn't pretend to be a man. She weaponized being a woman, while outsmarting every man in the room. To Egyptians, she was Philopatris, father-loving goddess. To Rome, she was a seductress. But the truth? She was a strategist. She learned Caesar craved exoticism, so she arrived wrapped in a carpet. She saw Antony's love for Dionysian excess, so she sailed to him on a gold-proud ship, dressed as Aphrodite. Even her suicide was staged. Dying by snakebite wasn't just painless. It was theater, ensuring she'd be remembered as immortal. But here's what they never teach you. Cleopatra was the first Ptolemy to speak Egyptian. She prayed at temples, revived rituals, and ruled as Isis incarnate. Yet Rome painted her as a harlot. Why? Because a woman who mastered both divinity and realpolitik was scarier than any army. Hatshepsut and Cleopatra exposed the truth. The pharaoh's divinity wasn't sacred. It was a toolkit. Hatshepsut used its symbols, beards, titles, to blend in. Cleopatra twisted its myths to stand out. Both ruled brilliantly. Both were vilified. Why? Because their success threatened the biggest lie of all, that the god-king myth was unshakable, eternal, and inherently male. Think about it. The system crumbled when women mastered it. Just right timing, right propaganda, and ruthless audacity. Part 6. Pharaohs claimed to command the sun, the Nile, and life itself. But when foreign invaders stormed Egypt's gates, the gods stayed suspiciously silent. Why? Because divinity can't stop a sword, and the pharaoh's greatest secret wasn't their power, it was their desperation. Yet 2,000 years after Egypt's fall, we're still obsessed with their golden mass and mummy curses. How? Because the pharaohs didn't just build an empire, they built a story, And stories, unlike empires, never die. Egypt fell to Rome in 30 BC. Cleopatra's suicide should have ended the myth. Instead, it went viral. Romans looted obelisks as garden decor. Napoleon's troops shot cannonballs at the Sphinx's nose. Victorians held mummy unwrapping parties. Each era stripped Egypt's corpse for relics and repackaged the pharaoh's story. Why? Because the lie was too good to die. The pharaohs sold eternity, and we bought it. Their curse sells movie tickets. Their art fuels conspiracy theories. Their gold fills museums. Even their failures became legends because they wrote the script.